Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and I'm joined by Brian Smith today, and we're going to talk about recruiting, especially the class of 2025 that's about to get kickstarted. But I do want to let you know that LinkedIn is the college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So we're going to move on to the 2025 recruiting class, Brian. And thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Yeah, no problem. This is everything getting started once again. 7-on-7, Under Armour camps, Elite 11. Here we go.
Yeah, and junior days are happening as we speak right now. They're going to be going on to schools all across the country. And let's go ahead and start with quarterbacks. And I joke, like last year at this time, we were having a conversation about Damon Williams. And the year before that, we were talking about Marcel Reed. And neither one of those ended up at Ole Miss. So maybe this is a general thing, regardless of where they're planning on going to school. But I guess the conversation starts with Deuce Knight, the Notre Dame commit.
Yeah, you're going to recruit him until you can't recruit him anymore. I've seen him play live. He's got a 42-inch vertical, 6'4.5". He's fast. He's got a big arm, and he's from the state of Mississippi. So he's from George County down in the southeastern part of the state. But, yeah, you got to start recruiting him. There's a bunch of kids around the South that I'm sure Wayne would love to get. The McIntyre kid out of Nashville, especially with Bama's situation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. That was a guy they wanted. Maybe he could end up at Ole Miss. Who knows? So I would start with Deuce Knight, but they're going to have a pretty broad spectrum. He's offered kids in California, Texas, Louisiana, all over at quarterback. So I'm kind of curious what Wayne's board is realistically right now.
Yeah, and this year, unlike most years, there's no clear front runner for the quarterback candidate for this class. Right. You know, with Jackson Dart, this being his last go-round, and next year it's going to be an Austin Simmons versus Walker Howard competition, and you have Anthony Maddox laying in the wings back there. Maybe Ole Miss is looking for next year's like, hey, we're going to go into the portal, and they're going to try and find somebody that route. Maybe that's the plan.
Yeah, I don't think you can leave out any opportunity. The portal, like, look, Julian Sand is allegedly going in the portal. He's the kid that was signed with Alabama and might have been the best quarterback in the country. You just never know. So don't just discount anything happening. And Kiffin obviously is somebody that likes to use the portal anyway. Is there a possibility one of the kids you just mentioned leaves Ole Miss and then that opens up a portal spot? Of course. So there's a lot of things to figure out in the next 12 months.
You know, you mentioned the Alabama situation, and I'm absolutely amazed at the level of which their roster is getting absolutely just poached by everybody right now. And this is with Kalen DeBoer being a really good coach, but they've lost players early to the draft. They've lost key pieces of their recruiting class, and people are going in the transfer portal. I think they're at like 30 or 35 kids that have left since all of this started. I mean, I did not think that the program, whenever people were talking about it, this is a program, I don't think that exists. I think it's always just a team, and you're trying to just do the best you can from team to team. But I thought Alabama might have been the exception to where there's a little bit of brand stickiness to them. And this year absolutely proved it wasn't.
If it can happen to Alabama, it can happen to anybody. Think about it. Left tackle, All-American freshman safety, Julian Sand, the quarterback I'm just talking about. Anybody and everybody. These are 5-star guys walking out the door. Rodell Williams going from Alabama to Florida State. They've got guys just leaving everywhere. So
Caleb Downs.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. He's the safety. Like, he's as good a safety as there is in the country. He was only a freshman.
Yeah.
So
he's got Ed Reed potential.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's an amazing boy. I put it like this, and people always talk about Kalen DeBoer, and it's like you always hear he's like he wins games against teams even though he has the second best roster. And after a while, you wonder if that just means that Alabama's talent level is going to go down, because if you either can or you can't recruit, and the brand doesn't recruit itself. But if you look at like Caleb Downs, if Nick Saban, when he left Michigan State, let's say he was in that Kalen DeBoer situation as a coach coming out of Michigan State, Caleb Downs would still be at Alabama. That is a battle he wouldn't have lost.
That's just the way it is, man. I mean, reputation matters. I think him not being a Southern guy is part of it, but he's an offensive guy, and they still lost a bunch of offensive recruits too. That's the part that surprised me. But again, I don't know their plan, so I'll let this play out. But I'm not going to lie. I'm ready to turn the page on Alabama being dominant every year. So it's nice to see other schools get some of these 4 and 5 star players, and whatever happens is going to happen. But wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss ended up being the beneficiary multiple times from all this.
Yeah, and Lane has a relationship in Tuscaloosa, and Pete Golding was there. And if the rumors keep true, they're going to go get Joe Cox. And there's a lot of peace there. And one of the players that is interested is somebody we've talked about over the course of the last year, and that's Caleb Odom. He has not entered the transfer portal yet, but if his position coach goes to Ole Miss, he was either Alabama or Ole Miss all through his process. He chose to go play for the GOAT, who's no longer there. You have to think that Ole Miss is going to be in a pretty good situation for Caleb Odom if all of this goes down.
Well, that would be a big get. 6'4", 6'5", 215, really good football player at Carrollton High School, just across the line from the state of Alabama in Georgia. Yeah, he was a national recruit. He could have went to about any school he wanted to. And Lane has got a tremendous history with big-bodied receivers and flex tight ends anyway. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But getting the coach certainly provides a conduit for him to go from Tuscaloosa and head on over to Oxford.
All right, before we get out of here today, since it's the first time that we've really done the 2025 class, what are some players, not necessarily Ole Miss involved, but what are some players that people need to keep an eye on during this process?
Well, it's pretty broad. 2 points here. Number one, the 25 class nationally is just deeper in general. Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, whatever. Deuce Knight's a kid. If you haven't seen him play, check him out. He's arguably the best player in the state. The receiver, Kate Cunningham, I believe is his name, the kid from, forget the high school. He's a phenom. He might be the best receiver in the country. Those are the 2 kids in Mississippi that are just, they can do whatever they want in terms of school. And I also think if you're smart, you're going to check out some of the talent in Louisiana. Lane has done a good job down there. Ole Miss is going to have a better chance now that Bama doesn't have Saban, and they were trying to get in there anyway. Check out some of the Louisiana talent. It's another really good class in the Bayou State.
Yeah, nationally, though, outside of Ole Miss, what are some names of major prospects? Yeah.
Well, I would say George McIntyre is the guy that a lot of people want to know about. He's the kid from Nashville. Quarterback, kind of reminds me of Manning. That's a player that is about as good as it gets. He's very polished for his age. There are 2 or 3 players in California, their quarterbacks. I'm probably going to butcher this name. The kid that's at Tennessee, the quarterback, Iamanella or whatever, his younger brother, national recruit. He's a quarterback, somebody that Lane has offered, ironically. The kid that's committed to LSU already, it's weird. They're getting a Detroit quarterback. I've never heard of LSU getting somebody from Detroit, but he's arguably the best player in the country. Bryce, and then down in Florida, DJ Pickett. If you have not heard the name DJ Pickett, you soon will. He's a kid literally out of 8th grade. I would have taken him then. He was a 6'1" corner in 8th grade, shutting down kids in Tampa. It's finally his year. He's got an offer from every school in the country and has for about 2 years.
Interesting. And a cornerback from Central Florida, South Florida, yes, sign me up all day.
There's always somebody, man. It's amazing how the state of Florida has corners. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just all you need to know is prime times from Fort Myers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just a terrific player. And there's just corner after corner after corner after corner that comes through. And I mean, Florida's DBU, and they call themselves DBU. And a lot of that is because of Florida corners.
That's right. You can recruit locally there. If you get a kid out of Florida at that spot, or D-line to a certain degree as well, chances are good you found a good ball player.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, joining us. Thank you so much, Brian. and we'll see you as this year moves on, man.
All right. I appreciate it, sir.